The Sun and Wayward Stars by ThBiButterfly. Chapter 6, The Condensed Version. Regulus hid in his room for the rest of the evening. After a few harried attempts by Sirius to convince him to open the door, his brother finally left him alone. He stared up at the canopy of his bed and tried to reason out the situation. His hands gripped the sheets below him as every excuse fell flat. The fact that Regulus's mind seemed singularly focused on the fact that Potter was aroused by the altercation was not helping. It was entirely Potter's fault. He was the one who lost control. Regulus could hardly expect his body to remain unaffected when a fit bloke pressed his erection against him. He was only human. And so very gay. Even if that bloke was the one person he detested above all others. A nagging thought prodded his mind, questioning if detested was truly an accurate description. Potter was an arrogant prat. He could justify that assessment easily. He strutted around like he was a gift to the world and flashed his obnoxious smirk with ease. That sort of confidence was clearly the result of a spoiled upbringing and lack of discipline. Regulus hated that he envied him for it. As Pandora pointed out, he was fit. Despite his refusal to admit to her, Regulus couldn't lie to himself. The problem was that Potter knew it too. He was well aware of this effect on other people and often used it to his advantage. It was yet another reason Regulus kept his distance. No need to acknowledge it if he ignored the blow completely, and there was absolutely no way he'd ever admit it to Potter himself. He was infuriating on all fronts. His easy friendship with Sirius extended well past simply being mates and dangerously infringed on brotherhood territory. The daft pranks he and his friends tormented the other houses with were juvenile and foolish, but for attention. Not to mention, he bragged endlessly about himself. It was disgusting. The obnoxious prick with his messy curls that he tousled carelessly and that kept deep bronze skin that seemed to glow in the sun. Regulus pounded his fist into the mattress, annoyed that his wayward brain refused to stay on track. He was listing the Azor's flaws, for fuck's sake. Sighing heavily, he rubbed at his face, trying to banish the image from his mind. Annoying, demanding, prideful, obnoxious, arrogant, and too bloody fit. A soft knock sounded on the door. Regulus, Sirius said you were upset. Can I come in? Scrunching his face up, Regulus shook his head virulently. Not her. Why did her brother have to send Effie? She was entirely too kind and impossible to deny. That was why he sent her. He hauled himself out of the bed and moved the chair away from the door. Hesitantly, he pulled the door open and shifted out of the way to let her in. Are you all right? She asked, reaching out for him, gripping his shoulders, her warm brown eyes searching his face. You're so pale, love. Come, sit down, let me fetch you a drink. Effie guided him back to the bed, then pulled her wand out of her sleeve, quickly conjuring a glass. She filled it with water from the tip of her wand. And handed it to him. Regulus folded his legs underneath him and accepted the glass. He took a deep drink and then nodded his thanks. Now, what can I do to help? She asked, patting his knee gently. Let's start with why you're upset. Regulus glanced up at her, his eyes flitting across her face. She was so earnest, the concern genuine in her expression. It galled him to his soul to see her worried about him, and he fought against the sudden urge to spill his secrets to her. Dropping his chin to his chest, Regulus shook his head. I don't want to talk about it. Effie lifted a hand towards his face. Flinching reflexively, Regulus squeezed his eyes shut. It wouldn't hurt as much from her as it did from his mother. He was certain, but he braced himself for the impact anyway. Refusal to a direct question wasn't permitted, and there was a petulant tone in his response. A wallop across the face was the least he deserved, he knew that. She inhaled sharply, then brushed his hair back from his eyes. She cradled his cheeks with her warm hands and lifted his chin. "Oh no, Regulus, darling, you're safe here. No one will hurt you, especially not me." His eyes flew open, blinking rapidly as he focused on her face. Confusion flickered across his features. "You're not angry with me?" "Of course not," she assured him, stroking her thumbs over his cheek. Evie leaned in and kissed his forehead. "You don't have to tell me anything if you don't want to. I just want to know what you can. I just want you to know that you can. I promise to protect any confidences that you share with me." Regulus pressed his lips together, overwhelmed and uncertain. His gut instinct was to remain silent. It was safer to keep his mouth shut. Unlike his brother, Regulus learned from the experience, and in his experience, no one kept confidences. One way or another, they were thrown back in your face, whether it was from Sirius in the heat of an argument or a so-called friend spreading rumors. "It's all right. You don't have to say anything now," Evie said, patting his cheek. "Just know I'm always willing to talk when you're ready." She settled onto the bed next to him and reached for his hand. Covering it with both of hers, Evie glanced around the room with a pensive expression. Regulus expecting her to question him further, or goading him into talking, like Pandora often did. Instead, she remained silent and stroked the thumb along his palm. The longer they sat together, the lower Regulus's shoulders sank in. In the quiet, his mind prodded at him to say something, anything. He was disconcerted by her presence, but wasn't ready for her to leave either. Clearing his throat, Regulus focused on her hand cradling his. "Why do you care about Sirius?" he asked finally. It was one of the many questions he'd wanted to ask when he arrived. They were strangers, yet Evie and Monty had enveloped him in their little family without a second thought. Evie's lips twitched. "It's just in my nature, I suppose. Always was the sort of girl that collected stray animals and broken people." She squeezed Regulus's hand. "Where do you think Jamie gets it?" Regulus stares at her incredulously. "I don't understand." "It's the right thing to do, and besides, I like feeling needed," Evie explained, a soft smile sliding across her face. "If I see someone who needs help, I always offer. Jamie is the same way, I find." She tilted her head to the side. "He practically adopted Sirius on the very first day, from what I hear. When he needed a place to stay, I was more than happy to have him here. You too, if you like." "Oh, right," Regulus grumbled, dropping his gaze to his lap. Pursing her lips thoughtfully, Evie watched him flick fluff from the quilt of his trousers. She waited several minutes before speaking again. "I didn't mean to intimidate you or to intimate that you or Sirius are broken, Regulus. Just that you needed help, and my family is more than willing to assist if we can." "All right." Evie sighed. Can I ask you something a bit personal? Feel free to say no." Regulus side-eyed her cautiously. "I'd rather you didn't." "Fair enough," Evie agreed, nodding slowly. "Well, if you did want to talk, even if it's about something mundane or silly, I'm available anytime. Monty too, if you're more comfortable with him." "Thank you," Regulus whispered, wishing more than anything he could take her up on the offer. It wasn't easy. He knew that well. His parents would never allow him to leave entirely. Not now. Not ever. The next day, Regulus decided to hide in the lab instead. Potter and Sirius couldn't even enter the room without setting off the alarm, and Monty was usually caught up in his work, too busy to question him. Squirreling away in a corner seat, Regulus pored over the potions book he'd borrowed, making notes on piece of parchment. He'd already picked several tips that should prove useful in class. Slughorn was horribly boring, but Regulus loved the logic behind potions. After several hours and multiple pieces of parchment notated on, Regulus stood up and stretched. He glanced at Monty, still firmly lost in his head, releasing an amused breath as he spotted the bloke's hand reach up to fluff the curls carelessly. Regulus shook his head. It was kind of strange to see Potter's mannerisms on his parents. He gathered up his notes and set aside the book, hoping... Oh, no, wait. I'm sorry, this is my cat. No, wait. Damn it. Busa. No, wait, hold on. Stop it. What the... I don't even know what you just did. Dang it. It was kind of strange to see Potter's mannerisms on his parents. He gathered up his notes and set aside the book, hoping he'd get a chance to pursue a few more before he left. Surely he'd find time in the next week and a half. Regulus carefully tucked the parchment into his pocket and sighed. Normally he'd minimize them to protect the pages from getting rumbled, but he'd still failed to find his wand. Despite searching the library and his path to the library, from the library to his bedroom late last night, it was still missing. Even his attempt to summon his wand failed, though that spell was pretty weak without his wand, ironically. Regulus was trying to remain calm about the situation, however. It had to be in the library somewhere, likely rolled under a piece of furniture, and was simply stuck. Surely that was it. Heading out, Regulus? Monty asked, looking up from his cauldron. His glasses were steamed up, but he peered over them at Regulus. Yes, I thought I'd spend some time outside, Regulus said, nodding slightly. Monty nodded in approval. Very good. A bit of fresh air is good for you, for the lungs and the mind. Clears things right up. Regulus smiled to himself as he turned towards the door. He'd grown rather fond of Monty already, enjoying his casual air and impressed with his devotion to his work. Stepping out of the lab, he glanced around cautiously. It wouldn't be out of character for Sirius or Potter to pop up out of nowhere, especially here at the manor house. He was starting to think there were hidden hallways and doors connecting every room. Seeing no one, Regulus moved stealthily down the stairs, stepping carefully to avoid making a sound. He slipped into the library for one more quick check for his wand, reminding himself that he'd truly intended to sneak in a little flying time today. Regulus walked around the settee several times, ducking to look under desks and tables nearby. He frowned, muttering a summoning charm under his breath. No luck. Annoyed, Regulus propped his hands on his hips and surveyed the room, noting every detail. It had to be here. The furniture was in the same position it had been yesterday, except the settee. It was likely shoved aside in the scuffle with Potter. The thought sparked a light flush to his cheeks, which Regulus quickly covered with his hands. He ordered his brain to stop thinking about it. I thought I'd find you here, said a low voice from the doorway. Regulus's head snapped up, the tension leaving him immediately when he spotted Remus. Breathing in deeply, he lifted a hand to wave. Shaking himself clear, Regulus returned to scanning the library. I've lost my wand, somehow. It has to be here. Somehow? Regulus asked, amusement playing across his features. He leaned against the door jamb and loosely draped his arms across his waist. Why didn't you ask Sirius to summon it? I didn't want to explain how I lost it, Regulus said quietly, crouching down to examine his settee. He ran his fingers along the cushion, hoping it slipped down in between. Observing him for a moment, Remus poked his tongue to his cheek, thoughtfully. When Regulus didn't elaborate, Remus cleared his throat. All right, I'll bite. How did you lose your wand? Hesitantly, Regulus shrugged. Potter stole my book and then taunted me with it. I tried to get it back, and we ended up wrestling, sort of. He ducked his head to check the nearest bookcase, hoping Remus didn't notice the blush blooming on his cheeks. You had me, then you lost me, Remus mused, chuckling to himself. That sounded quite Sirius and James themselves until the end. The two of them are constantly wrestling or play fighting. Rather surprised that you jumped into it, though. Remus raised his wand. I see a wand. Nothing happened. Not in the library, then. Remus met Regulus's gaze and shrugged apologetically. I didn't jump into it. I was held hostage, Regulus refuted, his cheeks heating further. I was just trying to get my book back, and we fell, and he refused to let me up until it got awkward. Remus's eyebrows soared up to his forehead. It got awkward? With James. He lifted off the door jamb and walked into the library, flicking his wand at the door to close it behind him. I'm going to need more details than that, Regulus. I really don't want to talk about it, Regulus huffed, leaning back against the bookcase. All right, but if you don't tell me, I'll just ask James and get his version instead, Remus pointed out. Do you want me to get his perspective instead of yours? He propped his hands on the back of the tall chair. He's prone to exaggerate, and I'd really prefer the condensed version. Regulus dropped his gaze to the floor and nodded. Fine, but it's a bit embarrassing, and I'd rather you not tease me about it. Well, then definitely don't tell your brother, Remus advised. He circled his hands. Go on. We fell. I landed on top of him because I was standing on a settee trying to reach for my book. He tried to coerce me to tell him why I was so rude to him by holding me captive. We argued as I tried to break free. Then he flipped me on my back and held my hands above my head because I was hitting him, Regulus explained, ruffling a hand through his hair. Remus nodded slowly. So far not seeing the problem. The antagonistic wrestling matches are fairly common in the dorm. Regulus huffed. Then I called him an arrogant asshole and he started acting strange. Next thing I know, he's aroused and apologizing. Pressing his lips together, Remus fought back a grin. His entire face twitched aggressively. His entire face twitched aggressively in attempts to hold it back. Eventually, he dropped his face against his arms and shook with silent laughter. His hands flailed helplessly in front of him. It's not that funny, Regulus said, struggling to keep a straight face when Remus was dissolving into giggles in front of him. It really is, Remus gasped out, rubbing a hand over his face. He sucked in a deep breath and desperately tried to calm himself. When he'd regained a bit of control, he pointed at Regulus. I think you triggered a kink. Regulus blinked rapidly at him. A what? Coughing slightly, Remus shook his head. It's an assumption anyway. He's never said anything about fancying blokes though. He shrugged. I do know that he likes being told off. James finds it attractive. As in head girl, Lily Evans? Oh, you're referring to her dressing him down in front of the Great Hall last year? Regulus checked, tilting his head to the side. That's the one. She ripped him into shreds in front of the entire school, and he had to take a long, cold shower afterwards. Sirius teased him about it for weeks, Remus explained. Doubt James would have let anyone else razz him for it without retribution. But Sirius is, well, serious. Regulus nodded and laughed. He's definitely one of a kind. Thank you for watching. I am sorry for point 1, my cat deciding to walk in, and point 2 for laughing, because it was just funny. I really love that in very many fics you read that Regulus has like a soft spot for Monty, because you also read it in Best Friend's Brother, and I love it there too. It's just really sweet. And also Remus and Regulus, their friendship, I just love it so much. It works so well. I hope you enjoy this video, and I also hope you have a very nice day. Bye!